Shalom, everyone. This is David Parsons.
Shalom para todos. Yo soy David Parsons.
Someone is on the translators. You need to come off. Okay. Shalom, everyone. This is David Parsons of the Christian Embassy in Jerusalem, welcoming you to our weekly webinar. It's Thursday, 4 p.m., bringing you another exciting and urgent topic here. Today, we're going to be covering the recent Iran-Saudi normalization deal. There's been a break in their relations, but they're making amends. It's quite surprising and shocking to most people. Did not expect this because Iran and its nuclear threat, the war in Yemen, came as a surprise. And we're going to talk about its impact on Israel and the region and even the world, the whole dynamic, because China brokered this, the whole dynamic between China and America and Russia and this new multipolar world we're entering. And our guest today to help us sort this out, we have returning again, our special guest, the IDF Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Avivi. He's the founder and president of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. Good to see you again, General Avivi.
Thank you very much, David. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for being with us. Just want everyone to know, if you need translation, we have French, Portuguese, Spanish, and Thai over on the under the interpretation function over on our Zoom call. If you're on Facebook Live or YouTube channel watching this, you go over during the Zoom Live, you can have the translation there into those languages. Okay, so Iran and Saudi Arabia reached a normalization of relations accord in early March that caught much of Israel and the West by surprise. And part of the surprise that it was brokered by China. The U.S. had been trying to at least stabilize the region by getting the Saudis and Iranians together in some way, weren't successful. And it was China that actually did this in early March after 4 days of very discreet talks in Beijing. The Chinese government was able to get the parties together and announce a normalization of relations again. So the background to this, General V can give in fill in more about this, but you have a long historic rivalry between the Persians and the Arabs. There's a lot of history of wars and conflicts there, as well as the Sunni Shia rivalry within Islam, that schism and that split, where Saudi Arabia, as the guardians of Mecca and Medina, are seen as really the heads of the Sunni world, Sunni Muslim world, and the Shiites, of course, the Iranian regime claims to be at the forefront of that branch of Islam. And since the Ayatollahs took over in the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979, there have been several breaks in diplomatic relations between Iran and Arab countries, including the Saudis. There were the 1987 riots on the Hajj, and Egypt after terrorist-affiliated militiamen affiliated with Iran assassinated Anwar Sadat in 1981 over the Israel-Egypt peace treaty. The latest rupture between Iran and Saudi Arabia happened 7 years ago, 2016, when a Iranian mob, they stormed and burned the Saudi embassy in Tehran in protest of Riyadh executing a radical Shiite cleric who was encouraging terrorism. But China's managed to put them back together, and we may even see Iranian President Raisi visiting Riyadh very soon. So, General Avivi, help us understand, did this come as a surprise to you? Were you expecting something along these lines? And it's sort of a big picture review here, what you want to fill in and how we got to this moment and why are they coming together now?
Thank you very much, David. So actually, 3 weeks ago, I spent a week in Washington. We met with more than 20 senators and congressmen, and we talked about this reality. So we anticipated it 2 weeks before it happened. And now I'm getting many phone calls from Washington. How did we know? How did we understand that this is happening? No, we were not surprised. And we have to really understand the larger context. So looking really at the big picture, I would say this. We've seen a steadily growing strengths of the East overall over the West. It's a long process. We've seen the Chinese economy growing constantly and the way they are affecting the economical, the whole globe economically. We've seen India growing a lot. We've seen the East also technologically moving and advancing all the time and challenging the West. This is a process where the East is getting more and more dominant in the globe at the expense of the West. And it doesn't come as a surprise that for the US and for both administrations, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, China is perceived as the biggest emanating threat to the US. Now, in the last year, we have witnessed a very, very deep and big change in the global arena, and this change is due to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Basically, the Russian-Ukrainian war, I would say, is a sign of the challenge the East is posing on the West. And the answer of the West to this challenge was imposing very, very tough sanctions on Russia. We know that for a long time there is also, to a certain level, sanctions on Iran and even on China. And this reality is creating a dynamic where the East is getting closer and closer together, more and more coordinated, and the countries in the East are becoming more and more dependent on China. So today, Russia, in order to function, sell oil, buy goods, they have become very, very dependent on the Chinese economy. The same goes for Iran. Iran signed a huge deal with China, and Iran is selling today most of its natural resources and oil to China. The same goes with North Korea. So the East is getting closer and closer together and is creating an Eastern bloc. Now, the way the East is looking at the West, they are looking at the West and saying, okay, we recognize that the West is superior with its military, especially the US. The US is stronger militarily than all of them together, Russia, China. The US has a very, very big and strong army. But having said that, what the East sees is zero willingness of the West to use power. The only thing the West is willing to do is to impose sanctions. And the East, and this is the bad news, has adapted to these sanctions. They are able to, not entirely, but mostly overcome them by trading mainly amongst themselves, because we are talking here about huge economies. And they're managing to really bypass sanctions. And the moment they understand that the West is not willing to use power, only sanctions, and they can overcome them, this emboldens them. This makes them understand that they can pretty much do whatever they want, whether it's Russia attacking in Ukraine, whether it's Iran expanding its militias all over the Middle East and moving forward with the production of future nuclear capabilities, whether it's North Korea challenging again and again Japan and the US and South Korea, and China that is expanding its economical influence throughout the world. And the world is not stabilized. The moment the West is not willing to stand strong, the world is not stabilized. So we have seen already in December, a director of CIA saying clearly to the administration there is a Russian-Iranian front in the Middle East. Russia has become very dependent on Iranian technology, UAVs, missiles, the Iranian military industry, and Russia, because it's dependent on Iran, is willing to also assist Iran militarily. So they've become very close together, and this is a threat to the Middle East. And what we said 3 weeks ago in the US, we said, look, the Saudis and the Emirates and all of them, they're looking at that. They see this Eastern Bloc standing on the borders. They look back and they ask, where is the West? Is the West with us or not? And they are in a moment where they have to decide where are they going to put their alliance. Is the shift of power going towards the East, and now the Middle East should ally itself with China and Russia? Or is the West still with the Arab world? Now, the West is doing a very, very poor job in convincing the Sunni world that they are allies. We have had a very, very long strategic alignment between the US and Saudi Arabia, which started in 1945 with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, meeting with the Saudi king and signing an agreement that America will defend the Saudis and the Saudis will provide oil for America. This has lasted until Obama's administration. At the time of Obama, it was the first time in the history of the US that the US, because of the technologies that enhance production of oil, fracking industry mostly, managed to be completely independent. Not only independent, talking about energy, but the US for the first time became an exporter of oil, a huge exporter of oil. And in this sense, the Middle East lost its importance. And Obama, looking at this new reality, said, okay, if I'm not binded and I have to rely on the Saudis, I can open my thinking about who I want to do business with. And Obama was inclined to strengthen the relations with Iran, which is an existential threat. Iran is an existential threat for the Sunni world. And also with the Muslim Brotherhood, who is also an organization that is also an existential threat for the Sunni regimes. So this shook the Middle East. They suddenly understood that it's not sure that America will stand with them. And they're asking themselves, okay, if this is an existential threat for us, and America is not 100% behind us, we need to really think again, what do we do? This, by the way, created the reality where they came to Israel. The reason why we have the Abraham Accords is mostly the decisions Obama made at the time, which convinced the Arab world that they need to rely on Israel in order to be able to deal with the Iranians. So what is happening now is the Saudis are signaling. It's not that they are now in an alliance with Iran, not at all. But they are signaling to the US and to Europe that if they don't wake up and if they don't build a coalition with Israel, with the Saudis, with the Sunni world against Iran, if they're not willing to pose a credible military threat on the Iranian nuclear program, the Saudis might need to consider it again, their alliance, and maybe get much closer to China. So when I'm looking at this agreement, first of all, not surprising at all. We anticipated that. Second, it's not yet done. It's not that now Saudis are with the Iranians, not at all, but they're signaling to the West. And the big question is what will happen now? And what we explained in Washington is very important to understand. There are two scenarios talking about Israel. One scenario is that the US still doesn't lead, they stay behind, maybe they assist Israel with some capabilities. And at the end of the day, Israel will have to deal with the nuclear program of Iran. Now, if we do it by ourselves, The result of that will be regional war, because Iran will command Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq to shoot rockets, missiles, send UAVs against Israel. We will go into a regional war, and this regional war will bring world recession. It will bring a huge surge of oil prices. It will bring instability. It will affect something that is already not functioning and not really working well, which is a global supply chain that is pretty dysfunctional at the moment. It will be much worse because most of the goods of the world goes through the Middle East, from east to west and from west to east. And this will all be affected. This is in a scenario where Israel needs to deal alone with the Iranian threat, and the Iranians, because it's Israel alone, will be emboldened and reassured that they can attack us and deal with us. But there is another scenario. And the other scenario is that the Saudis are saying, we are willing to sign peace with Israel. We are willing not only to sign peace, we are willing to bring Pakistan, Indonesia, huge Muslim countries, Oman, to this peace. We are willing to do a very, very big peace agreement. But not only that, we are also willing to enhance oil production and take the prices down. We know how challenging it is for the West now, the surging prices. We feel it in Israel, the US, in Europe. And the Saudis are saying we are willing to produce more oil and take down the prices. But not only that, they are also saying that they are willing to open a new route of global supply chain. It's a route that basically President Biden, when he came to Israel, talked about. He came to Israel and he did a very interesting Zoom in Israel. In this Zoom, there were the Indians, UAE, and Israel. Now, if you open them up and you look at India, you will see that India, the shortest way to go from India to the Middle East is from India to UAE, to Abu Dhabi. You don't even need to go into the Hormuz Strait and arrive to Abu Dhabi, and there you build a train from Abu Dhabi through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, all the way to Israel. On the Jordanian-Israeli border, you have a train to Haifa. And it doesn't come as a surprise that Israel has invested huge amounts of money in building new ports. We doubled our port in Haifa, and now one port is managed by the Chinese, another port is managed by the Indians. We doubled our ports in Ashdod, and one port is managed by the Europeans, and the other one by Israel. The only big country that doesn't have a stake in our ports globally is the US. Why? I don't have a good answer why the US doesn't have want a stake here, but everybody has a stake here. So everybody is interested in moving the whole global supply chain through Israel. And this will take a month of global trade. So today the option is from India to go through the Suez Canal, through Egypt. This takes a month more than what I'm talking here. Moving it straight to Abu Dhabi, and from Abu Dhabi with train to Israel. But in order to do that, and this is Biden's idea, you need peace. You need peace with Saudi Arabia in order to move the goods through Saudi Arabia. So look at the options. One option is complete destabilization of the Middle East, recession, surging oil prices, instability. And the other option is huge peace agreement, oil prices going down, new routes of commerce, and deterrence. Now, what we're saying to the Americans is, look, you have the Russians, you have the Chinese. These are very big countries. Don't challenge them straight away. I mean, don't challenge them. Let's go to the weak link. The weak link is Iran. So if you challenge Iran, not only you stabilize the Middle East, because Hezbollah, Hamas, all of these guys, if you have a strong alliance between the US, the Sunni world, and Israel, no one will challenge it. Hezbollah won't kill itself by challenging a coalition, American Sunni Israeli coalition. Neither will Hamas. So then you can prevent this possible regional war. And it's enough to, you don't even need to fight with Iran. It's enough to really pose a credible military threat to already change reality. And let's say that the Iranians don't stop and we need to attack. This is not the Iraqi war. This is not Afghanistan. Destroying Iranian nuclear capabilities is one big major air attack. That's it. In 2 hours, nothing will be left. That's it. It's not a 20 years or years war. It's not boots on the ground. It's not conquering a state. It's an air attack. But if America, with the Saudis, with the Israelis, with the UAE, with all this power and intelligence and capabilities do it, we're able in a very short time not only to destroy completely their program, but also really affect the war between Russia and Ukraine, because Russia is independent on Iran. If you stop Iran, this will affect also the war in Ukraine. If you stop Iran, this will deter the Chinese from being aggressive in Taiwan, because then it will show what needs to be shown, that the West is willing to fight if needed. And it's not that we believe that, you know, every problem you need to solve with military power. But if you are not willing at all to use power, you are bringing wars, not preventing wars. You are destabilizing the globe, because there are nations who are willing to use power. And if they see somebody else afraid, they attack. This is what the Russians are doing in Ukraine. Why did they permit themselves to attack Ukraine? Because they perceive the West weak and not willing to fight. And now it's Ukraine. Tomorrow it will be another state. Another thing that we explained is that the West wants to stabilize the situation in Ukraine. So obviously dealing with the Iranians will help. But it's not only about that. I mean, today Israel, of course we are in alliance with the US, but we also keep options open. We need good relations with the Russians as well. So we are coordinating with them in Syria, and we need to keep good relations. But imagine that the US comes to Israel and says, okay, Israelis, we are building a coalition. We, the US, are willing to lead and challenge the Iranians. But if we do this, we want you Israelis to assist dramatically Ukraine. Of course, we'll assist dramatically Ukraine if this will be the case, if the US is willing to build a coalition and challenge the Iranians. And we can shift the whole thing around. If Israel decides to bring these technologies to Ukraine, this is a game changer. What we can do, no country can do. So there is a lot to gain from the US stepping forward, and this is what we are trying to do. And this is what also the Saudis are trying to do, to convince the US that they need to change policy and step forward. The CIA understands that, the American army understands that, the administration is not moving fast enough. So the Saudis are starting to pressure more, saying, you know what? You're not going to move forward? Okay. The Chinese option is not a bad option for us. And we are willing to contemplate. And this is the message that is sent to America, but it's still not the #1 choice of the Saudis. Saudis would rather have a strong West supporting them with Israel than giving up to the Chinese, Russians, and the Iranians. They understand that these guys not necessarily will be really on their side on the long term. But we are in a very, very dangerous moment. And if the US doesn't step forward and we won't see a change, this might be pretty devastating to the Middle East.
Thank you for that excellent overview and assessment of where we are. Some really, really good points there. I know Israel, General Avivi, has for years had to sort of navigate living here in the center of the earth, that, you know, they put a premium on the U.S.-Israel relationship, but Jerusalem also wants relations with the Chinese and also had good relations with Russia before the Ukraine war. Even Israel had a little more free reign to attack Iranian interests, Iranian and Hezbollah targets inside Syria without the Russians getting too upset. But all that has sort of changed, and Putin is trying to create this multipolar world where the U.S. is no longer the big boss, and there's several different poles of power and forcing people to choose sides. When we think of the Saudi decision, Crown Prince bin Salman really making this decision to go with China, how much of a factor was back in 2019? I think it was probably part of the Yemen civil war. The Iranians are backing the rebels there, the Houthi rebels. The Saudis are backing the regime. That Iranian proxies launched this coordinated attack on the Saudi oil fields in the east with guided missiles and drones that all showed up at once, very coordinated, well-timed, and showed their abilities. And I understand the Saudis wanted the U.S. to help them retaliate. I remember speaking with you earlier this year where you said, if someone attacks Israel, we never let it go unanswered. But the Saudis didn't respond. I understand it was because the U.S. would not back them or help them on it. How big a factor was that in bin Salman now calculating, I have to go east to China to get more stability or security for my country?
So, David, you are making a very, very important point, because what we saw in this attack is basically that all of the American technologies which deal with detection and air defense didn't function and didn't do the job. So the Iranians, with a coordinated attack from Iran and from Yemen, managed to really inflict a huge damage to the oil fields of Saudi Arabia without the American technology managing to stop that. We see, by the way, the same problem with missile attacks by Iranian proxies on American bases, whether it's missile attacks or UAVs. And also the level of success of American weapon systems to stop that are not good. And this makes the Saudis very, very nervous. On top of that, America didn't retaliate, didn't defend them, didn't challenge the Iranians afterwards. And this makes the Saudis wonder how much this alliance is worthwhile, because if the technologies are not good enough, and on top of that, there is no motivation to fight and defend, this becomes a serious problem. And this is why, by the way, on one hand, we see this movement towards China, but also at the same time, we see closer and closer relations with Israel, because on Israeli technologies they rely. We have to remember that Israel has proved again and again that it's able to intercept rockets, it's able to detect UAVs, even small ones, and destroy them in many different ways, from the sea, from the ground, with airplanes, with choppers. We have many different ways to do it. And until now, we're pretty successful in doing that. So obviously, the Sunni world is interested in Israeli technologies, and this has become a very big market for us. We're selling more and more Israeli technologies that assist the Sunni world against this Iranian threat and getting closer. But again, all of that without an American umbrella and then a clear commitment is very, very problematic.
The calculations of Crown Prince bin Salman, I think you mentioned it, but maybe we need a little more on this, that he decided to go use China as a broker to improve relations with China. They're a big trade partner, but how much of his calculation is that this will finally force Washington's hand to come give us the security guarantees we're demanding? Even the peace with Israel, an accord, a normalization accord with Israel, the Saudis joining the Abraham Accords, the Saudis have made clear it's conditioned not on anything Jerusalem does, but we want out of the U.S. security guarantees, perhaps F-35s. We want help with a civilian nuclear program. They got a little wish list that Washington has to fulfill, and then to make peace with Israel. So he's trying to get Washington to finally come to him by saying, I'm going on a date with China.
Yes, but also we have to remember that America has treated him really badly. Yeah. They're accusing him for the whole Khashoggi killing of that journalist. And unfortunately, I think that the administration is mixing between real politics and global interest to what they feel, as is a specific problem with him as a leader. And when you start mixing some values with real politics, sometimes it's really problematic. And they need to step out of this. They need to understand that, yes, Saudi Arabia is not perfect. It's a monarchy. It's not a democracy, but neither is Iran. And that the relationship between the US and Saudi Arabia are critical and are more important to global stability than what they think about the Crown Prince, on how accountable they feel he is, talking about the journalist that is accused of ordering his killing. Mm. And I think that this is the kind of talk we saw in Washington, and the big question is, is the administration able to really move forward and understand that they need, critically, they need this relationship and really commit to it and decide that we are strengthening our coordination and building a coalition. At Trump's administration, Israel was moved from EUCOM to CENTCOM. CENTCOM is in charge of the Middle East and the preparations against Iran. So this created a reality which is very good, that then enables us to be much more coordinated because we are all operating under an umbrella of CENTCOM. And we have very good relations with the Central Command of the US, and so do the other countries, but military good relations and even big drills that we are doing together now is great. It's not enough. We need the administration's commitment to build a coalition and start dealing seriously with this Iranian threat.
I want to touch on a couple aspects that the Saudi Iranian rapprochement region. One is the civil war in Yemen, the Iranians back inside, the Saudis the other. But now it looks like they've had a relatively successful ceasefire for a year or so, and they now want to renew that. And are we going to see Iranian arms shipments stop to the Houthi rebels in Yemen? And is it going to reduce the threat to Israel coming from Yemen?
The Iranians have global aspirations. And the part of their global aspirations is controlling critical strains where global trade moves. So they want to control Hormuz. They want to control Bab el-Mandeb, which is the entrance towards Egypt. And they are operating very strongly around Morocco, challenging Morocco by weaponizing Polisario, that is the organization that is fighting Morocco over West Sahara. They are weaponizing Algeria against Morocco. They are trying to infiltrate Shia into Morocco, which is a Sunni country. And this brought Morocco to decide to broker peace with Israel and sign a military MOU. Morocco is the first Arab country that signed a military MOU. And you have the chief of staff and Israeli generals visiting there all the time. And it's, you know, when you look at the map and you look where Morocco is and you look where Iran is, so far away. And you ask yourself, how come Iran is investing so much effort to bring down Morocco? And the answer is very simple. Morocco is
Gibraltar.
on the Gibraltar Strait.
Yeah.
So Iran is not going to give up its aspirations. They have a very, very clear strategy. They want to take control of all the most critical strains in the globe.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, they're going to continue weaponizing the Houthis. They're going to do everything they can to strengthen their control of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. And the same goes for Morocco and Gibraltar.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to stop.
Yeah, but
everything they do is just another step in their overall strategy.
That's interesting. I think this is probably new to a lot of our folks. It's somewhat new to me, this angle of their activity in the Western Sahara and challenging Morocco there. It's a conflict that's been going on a while, but Iran is ejected.
By the way, they are doing this because it's far away. They are doing this with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is training Polisario.
They're the bad guys. That's the next question. You have both in Syria and in Lebanon, you have the Sunnis siding, they're backed by Saudi Arabia, the Hezbollah, the Shiites, the Alawite regime, the Assad regime in Syria, backed by Iran. Is this going to bring a little more stability to those regions with Iran and Saudi Arabia trying to cooperate more?
No, it's not going to bring stability. Iran is going to continue to push forward and try to gain as much control as it can in Syria and on the Jordanian border. Israel is all the time attacking Iranian positions and distancing Iran from the Israeli border, and also trying to prevent Iranian capabilities from moving from Iran to Lebanon. We managed to a certain extent, but it's not 100%. The Sunnis in Syria, you have ISIS, you have Al-Qaeda, you have other groups that are fighting on one side they're fighting the Iranians, on the other side they're fighting the Turks, on the other side they're fighting the Syrians that are backed up by Russia. It's a very, very big mess, and it's not going to stop. And we also need to look at what's going on in Lebanon. Lebanon is, I would say, a non-functional state. It pretty much collapsed. It's not functioning. And Hezbollah is pretty strong and managing to really control what's going on there. But the question is, for how long? And the same goes for Iran. We see two countries, Iran and Lebanon, that are really, really suffering from very bad economical situation and instability. And on the other hand, militarily, Iran and also Hezbollah are getting capabilities and strong. And the question is, what will happen first? Are they going to collapse? Maybe in Iran have a revolution, even in Lebanon, or civil war? Or are we going to confront them? Are we going to find ourselves in a confrontation that can happen in three ways? One is because we'll be proactive. We will, let's say, attack Iranian installations, and this will bring war. Or maybe now, for example, today we started the Ramadan in Israel. We know that this is a very sensitive time. Maybe something with Gaza, Al-Aqsa, or something will happen that will create some kind of regional war, or a strategic decision by Iran to surprise us and attack. Now, Iranians have been building around us for many, many years, these militias. They're getting stronger and stronger, and it's reaching a point where Iran might say, okay, we got to some peak. This is the right moment to challenge and surprise Israel. And this might happen, and we need to be ready for all these scenarios. This is a huge challenge for the IDF. Mm. And I can say that the current situation inside Israel, what we're witnessing, is not helping us. This is only deteriorating our deterrence. It makes Hezbollah feel that we are what Nasrallah has been saying for many years, that the Israeli society is like a spider's web. It looks strong from afar, but if you touch it, it's very soft. And I don't believe what he says is true, but again, it's not about what we think, it's about what he thinks. And if he feels that really the Israeli society is not strong enough and the IDF is a bit shaken by this insubordination that we see at a certain extent, this might bring war on us, and we'll have to deal with it.
I want to ask how this Iran-Saudi deal, as you said, it's right now they've announced that they will do agreements and continue negotiating normalization agreements, that it's not a peace accord or treaty itself, but there's a whole process to do. But if the Saudis are really serious about going down this road, Washington doesn't react the way the Saudis want, how is this going to change Israel's calculations concerning the Iranian nuclear threat? There was I think an Israeli official who recently said that Iran, if it took a political decision to make a nuclear warhead, they could do it within 12 days. The IAEA even said they've got uranium enriched to about 85%. It's just a little step. You know, how does this change Israel's thinking about being prepared and even willing to carry out a decision to carry out an attack on Iran's nuclear program?
So Israel is facing two choices. One is relying on itself and dealing with this threat by ourselves with some level of coordination, the Americans and the Saudis and others, or really convincing the US and the West to step forward and do something about that. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is very, very focused on trying to bring the US and Europe on board. This is why he went to Italy. This is why he went to Germany. This is why now he's going to Britain. All these meetings have to do with convincing the West to stand firm against Iran. From the Europeans, we expect to snap back the JCPOA, meaning go back to severe sanctions against Iran. The US will expect to lead and build a coalition. And at the same time, the IDF is preparing for what it needs to do to deal with this threat. And if we need to, we'll do it by ourselves. But again, this is not a good choice. It's not a good choice for us, and it's not a good choice for the world. Mm. And we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, I think you said that Israel, or with the U.S. in a coalition, you could destroy Iran's nuclear facilities within 2 hours, but you'd have probably months and months of the fallout from these Iranian proxies in the region, and how you bring that back under control. I think we want to end up focusing on how this deal impacts the whole momentum of the Abraham Accords, because Israel, made peace with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain. There was talk of Oman next. Morocco came in. And then Netanyahu says, my priority now is to get a deal with the Saudis, bring them into the Abraham Accords. Is the Israeli dream of peace with Saudi Arabia now further off? Is it still salvageable? Would Crown Prince bin Salman in Riyadh still make a separate peace with Israel, just as a bilateral deal?
So I think there's a very good chance for a peace with Saudi Arabia, but the Saudis, and rightly so, are saying we're not going to do this without full American commitment. They're not going to spend this huge price without getting something from that. And what they need is US commitment. So they're offering a very, very big offer. As I said, it's peace, it's reducing oil prices, it's new global supply chains and so on, but they expect something in return. You don't give such a price for nothing. So they're keeping this option open, trading and basically saying to Netanyahu, you have the relations, you have the experience with the US, you are close to Biden. Broker this deal. Give us a win-win here. Mm-hmm. And this is a very big challenge for Netanyahu to really manage to convince Biden and the administration that this is the right way to go and to do the right thing, to side with us and to earn this very big peace agreement that we can manage to do. Mm-hmm. Now, talking overall about peace agreements, I want to remind you, David, that we had amazing relations with the Iranians. We had peace agreement, and you see how it ended. We had very good relations with the Turks for many years, and this later on deteriorated. Peace between Israel and Arab countries is first and foremost based on interest, on real interest. As long as we have alliance of interest, we'll have peace, and with this peace, we can push new interests like technology, economy, culture, things like that. But this will work as long as there are interests. Without this interest, peace might not last, as it didn't last with Iran. So we need to build on this interest, and for that, we need the US much more involved.
Okay. We really appreciate your time, your expertise, your insights, even dealing with American officials, probably officials from the Pentagon and the political echelon in Washington, in trying to communicate how this has impacted Israel. And I think you hit on a very good point that the President Roosevelt, at the end of World War II, went on a ship. He was already in a wheelchair, but he went on a big battleship off the coast of Saudi Arabia and made a promise to the King of Saudi Arabia, we'll make a trade. We will guarantee your security if you guarantee the free flow of oil and cheap oil that doesn't come to us at exorbitant prices. And that there was the oil embargo in '63 and all, but that deal basically held through the Bush II administration. But it was Obama and now Biden, after President Trump, Biden reviving some of Obama's policies that walked away from that sort of deal by trying to court Iran and shift Iran to whatever pro-Western policies or something. But it's a new dynamic. We'll have to see where this goes. Are arms shipments going to start to Yemen? I think that's a key factor. What are some of the key things to be looking at in the weeks ahead to say this thing is irreversible? The Saudis have shifted to China and this deal with Iran, or that they're hedging their bets and will still try and move back to the West?
David, before I address that, I want to say that, when you look at really these huge challenges, the Iranians moving towards possible nuclear capabilities, even the ability to build 10 bombs. This is what they're doing. They're building a capability, not for 1 or 2 or 3, 10 nuclear bombs, which might bring proliferation of nuclear capabilities all over the Middle East. The Saudis are getting ready for that. They have agreements with Pakistan to purchase bombs. They don't even need to produce them. The Egyptians have their programs, the Jordanians, everybody is getting ready, and this can be devastating. You see all these rockets around us. When I describe all this, people tell me, oh, man, listen, everything looks terrible. We have no hope. And I say, guys, I'm really optimistic because, we are the Jewish people. We have God on our side at the end of the day. And I think that we are really, it's really these moments when you understand that you cannot rely just on power. This is about believing. It's about believing in who we are, in the fact that we have God with us, and that will overcome all of that. And I think this is a big test for us. It's a big test because it's very easy in this reality to become gloomy and say, look what's going on and what can we do? But I know it in the bottom of my heart that we are going to win. We are going to win big time. And you cannot win without understanding that it's not just about airplanes and about intelligence and about alliances. It's about understanding that we have the strongest power on earth with us. And we just need to do our side, and God will do what He needs to do to make sure that we overcome these huge challenges.
Okay, we just want you to know, General Avivi, that there are millions of Christians around the world standing with Israel, praying with Israel, advocating for Israel and her defense. And we're behind you, and I agree completely in your statement of faith and confidence in Israel and in the God of Israel. And we thank you for your time again. We've been speaking with IDF Brigadier General in the reserves, Amir Avivi. He's the founder and president or chairman of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, the IDSF. What is it in Hebrew again?
Habitchonistim, like the security experts. It's hard to say Habitchonistim in English, so we called it Israel's Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. And many times when you have a name, IDSF, within time, people don't really know what it stands for.
Yeah.
So many times now when people say to me, IDSF, what does it stand for? I say IDF Superstars. That's us.
Okay. And he has a whole network of former IDF officers, generals, intelligence, all the different branches of the military who are part of his movement to shape and impact the security debate in Israel, and also to help counsel, advise, update, inform leaders in Washington and elsewhere on Israel's security challenges and needs. We really appreciate your time. Once again, all the best in your efforts and your travels.
Thank you.
I know you've got some videos coming out soon that we'll share with the Christian audience explaining some of these things, and we look forward to that. And we just appreciate everyone joining in with us here on this week's ICEJ weekly webinar from Jerusalem. We hope you've enjoyed it, been informed.
David, one more important thing.
Yes.
We're broadcasting today, and today is the first day of the month of Nisan.
Nisan, yes.
And in Nisan, the people of Israel were saved. And it says that in Nisan, redemption will happen again.
Okay.
So this is a very important month for us, a month of redemption.
Yes. The deliverance and redemption. We do sense, we had our global prayer gathering yesterday, hundreds of people joining us, and we sense there's something momentous coming up here in the month of Nisan, the convergence of Passover season and Ramadan and the Palestinian terror and the Iranian threat and many other things that who knows what's going to happen. But if we pray, seek God, it'll all turn out good for Israel. All right, we're going to sign off now. I just want to remind you next week at the regular time for the for the ICG weekly webinar next Thursday at 4 p.m. Instead of our regular webinar, we're going to have part of our Passion Week video series. It's a teaching series that you can come and join us here at that time for a good teaching, preparing you for Passover. It actually starts on Sunday. We have 5 different shows plus a special service, communion service from the Garden Tomb. There'll be 6 programs over the next 2.5 weeks or so as we enter the Passover season. Join us next Thursday and the Thursday after at this time for some of the Passion Week programming. And also next Wednesday at the regular time, 4 p.m., our global prayer gathering. So we just give you a warm shalom from Jerusalem. God bless you.
Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next Thursday at 4 p.m. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on our social media pages for more exclusive ICJ content.